इमामों की जो बनी पहचान, हदीस बुर्द यमानी की इनो आज़हरा। अल्लाह सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व अला मुहम्मद। अली के घर में तवक्कुल था और उसरत थी, इसी मकाम में रही शादो शाद मरा। जो अहमद मुरसिल की जाने जा ज़हरा। सलूक हुस्ने मुहब्बत से जो फिशां हर सू संवारती रही इस तौर से मकान ज़हरा। संवारती इस तौर से मकान ज़हरा। शर्फ ये मादर सादात का है लासाने, नबी के सुल्ब में बुनियाद खानदां ज़हरा। नबी के घर में निशानी रही खदीजा की, वो माँ की अक्ल की वारिस नुक्ता ज़हरा। लहू अज़ल से शहादत सरिश्म था उनकी, शहीद जिनके हुए लाल हैं वो माँ ज़हरा। अबुल हसन का गला खो खुदा के लिए, सुखन ये कर्ब में लाती थी बरज़बां ज़हरा। जो खोल देता है अज़हान के दरीचों को, वो दे गई है अदालत में एक बयां ज़हरा। निसार हो मेरे माँ बाप इनकी चकी पर, बना गई जिससे अज़मत का एक निशान ज़हरा। यकीन है ताहिर नाइज को क़यामत में अता करेंगी हंसी एक साहिबा ज़हरा। जनाब अहमद
Honor John.
बहुत बुलंद तर सलावत। नाराए तकबीर, नाराए सालत, नारा हैदरी, बावाज़ बुलंद तर सलावत। भर भर के जामे उल्फत हैदर पिया करो,
بھر بھر کے جام الفت حیدر پیا کرو، مشکل پڑے تو نام علی کا لیا کرو، مشکل پڑے تو نام علی کا لیا کرو، گر چاہتے ہو گر چاہتے ہو خلد میں اونچا ملے مقام، زہرا کے دشمنوں پہ تبرہ کیا کرو، بہت بلند تر صلوات۔ سینوں کی سیاہی کو گلابی نہیں کہتے، سینوں کی سیاہی کو گلابی نہیں کہتے، اظہار حقیقت کو خرابی نہیں کہتے، اصحاب پیمبر اصحاب پیمبر پہ دل و جان سے قربان، گستاخ سیدہ کو صحابی نہیں کہتے، گستاخ سیدہ کو صحابی نہیں کہتے، باز بلند تر صلوات۔ بر حبیب خدا ختم انبیاء بلند تر صلوات۔ چلو سلام کریں ایسے آستانے کو، حسین پال کے جس نے دیا زمانے کو، بشر تو چیز ہے کیا، خانہ خدا بھی رشید سلام کرتا ہے زہرا، تیرے گھرانے کو، چلو سلام کریں، بہت بلند تر صلوات۔ بہت بلند تر صلوات۔ گونجی بوقت عصر صدا، میں حسین ہوں، گونجی بوقت عصر صدا، میں حسین ہوں، کاٹو نہ میرا خون خشک گلا، ہاں کاٹو نہ میرا خشک گلا، میں نہ ہوں گونجی بوقت عصر صدا، اماں کسی نے پانی کی ایک بوند بھی نہ دی، اماں نے بوند دی، میں بار بار کہتا رہا، ہاں میں بار بار کہتا رہا، میں حسین ہوں گونجی بوقت عصر صدا، اماں کسی نے پانی کی ایک بوند بھی نہ دی، اماں کسی نے پانی کی ایک بوند بھی نہ دی، میں بار بار کہتا رہا، ہاں میں بار بار کہتا رہا، میں حسین ہوں گونجی بوقت عصر صدا، اے شامیوں کفن نہ دیا، مجھ کو غم نہیں، اے شامیوں کفن نہ دیا، مجھ کو غم نہیں، دے دو میری بہن کو ردا، ہاں دے دو میری بہن کو ردا، میں حسین ہوں گونجی بوقت عصر صدا، سوکھی ہوئی ہے شمر میرے حلق کی رگیں، سوکھی ہوئی ہے شمر میرے حلق کی رگیں، آتا تو چھری کو چلا، ہاں آہستہ تو چھری کو چلا، میں حسین ہوں گونجی بوقت عصر صدا، میں حسین ہوں، بعض بلندتر سلام،
محمد وآل محمد صلوات، نعرہ حیدری، محمد وآل محمد صلوات، مت سوچ کہ ہم تیرے دھماکوں سے ڈرے ہیں، مت سوچ کہ ہم تیرے دھماکوں سے ڈرے ہیں، یہ ظلم تو شیعوں پہ پہلے بھی ہوئے ہیں، یہ ظلم تو شیعوں پہ پہلے بھی ہوئے ہیں. تو رسم یزیدی کو بڑے شوق سے اپنا، تو رسم یزیدی کو بڑے شوق سے اپنا، ہم فاطمہ زہرا کی دعاؤں میں پلے ہیں. ہم فاطمہ زہرا کی دعاؤں میں پلے ہیں. اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات. فرش مجلس پہ فاطمہ زہرا لمحہ لمحہ شمار کرتی ہیں. اے عزاداروں آؤ مجلس میں، فاطمہ انتظار کرتی ہیں. پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. غربت کی انتہا ہے، نہ سایہ نہ ہے، زہرا تیری لحد پر. غربت کی انتہا ہے، نہ سایہ نہ ندا ہے، زہرا تیری لحد پر. چند پروں نے مل کر محروم لکھ دیا ہے. چند پتھروں نے مل کر محروم لکھ دیا ہے. سہارا تیری لحد پر. غربت کی انتہا ہے، نہ سایہ نہ ندا ہے، زہرا تیری لحد پر. تیرا بھری کعبہ تھی اور خون بھری ردا تھی. تیرا بھری کعبہ تھی اور خون بھری ردا تھی، اور خون بھری ردا تھی. جو شام سے بچا تھا زینب نے رکھ دیا ہے. سہارا تیری لحد پر. غربت کی انتہا ہے، نہ سایہ نہ ندا ہے، زہرا تیری. دوپہر ڈھل رہے ہیں، یام جل رہے ہیں. دوپہر ڈھل رہے ہیں، خیام جل رہے ہیں، خیام جل رہے ہیں. تصویر کربلا کی کوئی بنا رہا ہے. سہارا تیری لحد پر. غربت کی انتہا ہے، نہ سایہ نہ ندا ہے، محمد وعلی محمد صلی اللہ
اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد۔ ایک مرتبہ سورہ حمد اور 3 مرتبہ سورہ توحید پڑھ کے سارے مرحومین مومنوں بالخصوص یہاں جتنے موجود ہیں ان کے لواحقین کے لیے کے لیے محمد سارے بیماروں کی شفا کے لیے بھی آپ ایک مرتبہ سورہ حمد پڑھ دیں گے۔ بالخصوص ہمارے جاوید بخاری صاحب کی کل سرجری ہوئی، اینجی پلاسٹی اور سٹینڈ ڈالا گیا۔ پچھلے ہفتے میری بھی سرجری ایک ہوگی، دعا کریں کہ اللہ میں صحت و تندرستی دے۔ سورہ حمد پڑھ دیجیے۔ اور محمد وعلی محمد صلوات۔ عزیزم نے بہت خوبصورت پڑھا، اس کے بعد ویسے پڑھنا زیب تو دیتا نہیں ہے۔ بہرحال آج جاوید اپنا جعفری صاحب آئے ہوئے ہیں، تو جب یہ آئیں تو مجھے ضرور پڑھنا ہوتا ہے۔ میرے پاس کوئی خاص چیز تو نہیں ہے۔ میر انیس کے 3 اشعار کہ یا اے زباں خاموش، یا اے زباں خاموش، ادب کا ہے یہ مقام۔ یا اے زباں خاموش، ادب کا ہے یہ مقام، کوثر سے منہ کو دھولے تلے فاطمہ کا نام۔ یا اے زباں خاموش، ادب کا ہے یہ مقام، کوثر سے منہ کو دھولے تلے فاطمہ کا نام۔ اے دل بجز درود نہ کچھ کیجیو کلام۔ درود پڑھ دیجیے ایک مرتبہ، صلی اللہ محمد وعلی محمد۔ اے دل بجز درود نہ کچھ کیجیو کلام، اے کل اپنے سر کو جھکا دے با احترام، اور کاغذ پہ بیت ملازہ فرمائیے حضور، کاغذ پہ پہلے سورہ مریم کو دم کروں، کاغذ پہ پہلے مریم کو دم کروں، تب فاطمہ کی عصمت و عفت رقم کروں۔ کاغذ پہ پہلے سورہ مریم کو دم کروں، تب فاطمہ کی عصمت و عفت رقم کروں۔ اور فاطمہ سرخیل بزم آل اطہر ہو گئیں، فاطمہ سرخیل بزم آل اطہر ہو گئیں، اور طہارت میں پیغمبر کے برابر ہو گئیں۔ فاطمہ سرخیل بزم آل اطہر ہو گئیں، اور طہارت میں پیغمبر کے برابر ہو گئیں۔ کچھ علی کی قوتیں اور کچھ دعائیں آپ کی، کچھ علی کی قوتیں اور کچھ دعائیں آپ کی، دونوں مل کر فاتح احزاب و خیبر ہو گئیں۔ یا علی یا علی، اور باغوں میں خلد، نہروں میں کوثر ہے انتخاب، باغوں میں خلد، نہروں میں کوثر ہے انتخاب، قبلوں میں کعبہ، مصحفوں میں آخری کتاب، تاروں میں آفتاب مبین اور پھولوں میں ہے گلاب، اور سب عورتوں میں فاطمہ، مردوں میں بوتراب۔ سب عورتوں میں فاطمہ، مردوں میں موتراب۔ حضور مریم زنان وقت مسیحا کی ماں ہوئی، مریم زنان وقت مسیحا کی ماں ہوئی، اور زہرا ہر ایک عصر کی شاہ زنا ہوئی۔ درود پڑھ دیجیے ایک مرتبہ۔ تین اشعار اور ملاحظہ فرمائیے کہ اللہ رے فاطمہ کی بزرگی زہ شرف، اللہ رے فاطمہ کی بزرگی زہ شرف، بابا ملا تو فخر رسولان ما سلف، اللہ رے فاطمہ کی بزرگی زہ شرف، بابا ملا تو فخر رسولان ما سلف، شوہر ملا امیر عرب اور شہ نجف، شوہر ملا امیر عرب اور شہ نجف، اور اللہ نے حسین و حسن سے دیے خلف، اللہ نے حسین و حسن سے دیے خلف۔ پھر بات ملاحظہ فرمائیے، اللہ نے حسین و حسن سے دیے خلف، حضور دونوں امام خلق کے حاجت روا ہوئے، امام خلق کے حاجت روا ہوئے، اور مشکل کشا کے بیٹا دونوں امام خلق کے حاجت اور مشکل کشا کے بیٹے بھی مشکل کشا ہوئے۔ آخری تین اشعار، وہ کون ہے برگزیدہ حق، وہ کون ہے برگزیدہ حق، زباں پہ کیسے وہ نام آئے، وہ کون ہے برگزیدہ حق، زباں پہ کیسے وہ نام آئے کہ جبریل بھی آئے جو اس کے در پہ تو اس کو کرتا سلام آئے، وہ کون ہے برگزیدہ حق، زباں پہ کیسے وہ نام آئے کہ جبریل بھی آئے جو اس کے در پہ تو اس کو کرتا سلام آئے۔ جبریل بھی آئے جو اس کے در پہ تو اس کو کرتا سلام آئے، وہ سیدہ ہے، وہ طاہرہ ہے، وہ عالمہ ہے کہ جس کے بیٹے، وہ سیدہ ہے، وہ طاہرہ ہے، وہ عالمہ ہے کہ جس کے بیٹے خدا کے گھر سے بنے بنائے پڑھے پڑھائے امام آئے، خدا کے گھر سے بنے بنائے پڑھے پڑھائے امام آئے۔ ان نبی کی بیٹی علی کی زوجہ، خدا ہی جانے بس اس کا رتبہ، نبی کی بیٹی علی کی زوجہ، خدا ہی جانے بس اس کا رتبہ کہ جس کے عصمت مآب دامن میں پرورش کو امام آئے، کہ جس کے عصمت مآب دامن میں پرورش کو امام آئے۔ آخری شعر ہے کہ جس کے عصمت مآب دامن میں پرورش کو امام آئے، اور حضور نہیں ہے فخر نساء عالم تو اور کیا ہے کہ جس کے در پہ، نہیں ہے فخر نساء عالم تو اور کیا ہے کہ جس کے در پہ درود آئے، سلام آئے، رسول آئے، امام آئے۔ نہیں ہے فخر نساء عالم ہے کہ جس کے در پہ درود آئے، سلام آئے، رسول آئے، امام آئے۔ شکریہ شکریہ۔
جزاک اللہ یا علی محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ الحمدللہ، اب میں گزارش کروں گا، I will now request مولانا صاحب to the member. محمد وآل محمد۔
آواز بلند ترین صلوات۔
For all of our marhumin, let us begin with a Surah Al-Fatiha. For the love of Her Eminence, Lady Fatima al-Zahra, Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد كرمنا بني آدم آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight is our last night in our series analyzing the American and European trends of white supremacy. And in our conclusion this evening, inshallah, we wish to be able to respond to some of the examples that we have been giving that are reasons for supremacy to have come about, and to offer general solutions and also in particular certain Islamic solutions for you and I to reflect on for ourselves. And also when you and I are engaged with any other person and the topic of white supremacy comes up, these inshallah would be the bases for you and I to be able to respond back to whomsoever we are having this dialogue with. In our first night, we introduced the challenge, said that the ugly head of white supremacy and various other types of supremacies have again reared themselves in the times in which we live in. Second thing we stated was that the relationship between this topic and Ayyam Fatimiyya was that the demise and martyrdom of Her Eminence Salamullahi alayha ultimately was the reason as to why in the Muslim community supremacism crept back in. Because if you were able to bring about tribalism back into Islam after the death of the Holy Prophet of Islam, if you were able to bring about gender supremacy again back into Islam after the demise of the Holy Prophet of Islam, if you are able to murder Sayyidati Nisa al-Alameen and get away with it, and the Muslim community did not stop this, then everything that is in the 23 years under the guise of the Holy Prophet of Islam had been returned full circle back to the time of Jahiliyyah and pre-Islamic Arabia. The other thing we stated in our first night was that in the 16 to 1900s, the modern day concept that we have in the world today of race was first constructed. The idea of dividing the world into certain regions, classifying all species and human beings into these regions and saying that you belong to this region, your ethnicity is from this particular region, and therefore you are different to any other region constructed in that particular period. As a result, regions and classifications, we have inherited and remained within that classification. Till today, when you and I check a box, when you and I answer the question, where do you come from, what racial do you hail from, we answer not from our own understanding, but we have adopted the understanding that was given to us between the 16th and 19th centuries. And we asked you a question as to whether those are legitimate, whether those were created for the purpose of a particular power structure, and do they continue to retain the essential power structure? And if you continue to identify yourselves in those ways, does that continue to allow that power structure to exist? And if so, how then do we de-racialize our society if we continue to identify ourselves in the way which was first constructed in order to keep you within that particular framework? if you continue to answer that you are white, or you are black, or you are yellow, or you are green, then how do we get out of that system when one was created superior to the other? If I continue to answer and say I am Asian, or I am African, or I am Afro-Caribbean, or I am European, or I am American, but the purpose of that title was created in order to state that one was supreme over the other, how do I create equality and equilibrium within society if I continue to use those very same terms and definitions that were created in order to infuse and engender a racialist system? Last night, we took the discussion further and we highlighted that just as science was utilized in the 16th to 19th centuries in order to segregate, in order to create rights and remove rights from certain peoples, the Bible was also used for the very same ends. If you remember, we quoted Genesis and we quoted Timothy, whereby the concept of blackness being less than white and the concept of slavery being inherent in a godly system was mentioned within certain Bible texts. The same way science was used, also the Bible was used in order to foster and keep about those power structures. We then talked about eugenics. That's where we ended last night. And we need to answer the homework that we set for you yesterday. I'm sure you all did it, but in case any of you didn't do it, I will remind you the questions that we set in the homework and then begin to answer it, inshallah. We stated that eugenics, concept of you being born with a certain type of good gene, therefore better than other genes, was really put about into law between the 1910s and the 1930s. It exists until today. Different forms of eugenics continue to exist. But the types of eugenics that we've heard of historically is the one that was created or really established by Nazi Germany, and in particular in 1933. The idea was that if you had a different type of gene or a lesser type of gene, then you should be sterilized, meaning you should not be able to reproduce children. Because if you are only going to reproduce lesser human beings, then we should stop that human being from being reproduced. Then we can have a perfect, pure race in society. And as you know, in Nazi Germany, the concept of a perfect, pure race was what? White, European, blonde, blue-eyed. If you were not that, if you were not healthy, if you had some sort of defect, if you were differently abled, you were considered to be lesser. If you had epilepsy, if you were homeless, if you were an alcoholic, if you were a homosexual, if you were a Jew, all of these were considered to be lesser by birth. Your genes were less, therefore you need to be sterile. Time we would eventually that turned violent to the extent there were mass murders in the millions that took place, no longer just sterilization, but entire annihilation of populations that were different from the pure genes of white European race. Now, having explained this yesterday as another form of white supremacy, we left you with a particular homework. This was an ethical question based around the choices that you and I might make. This is very important to the solutions of white supremacy and any type of supremacy within ourselves. We asked you a question. If you could pick better genes, and pick them, pay for them, as we are on the verge of doing now, called consumer eugenics, would you pick better genes for your own children or not? If we turn the question on its head, if you could remove bad genes from your children, would you do so? What we stated yesterday is that those people who go to donors for genes, there is a higher value, monetary value, that is placed on certain genes. When you go to a donor bank, you will say, I want a gene of someone who is an astronaut, or a scientist, or a doctor, or a musician, or an athlete. Very rarely will you hear someone say, I want to purchase the genes of a janitor. But the immediate question comes up, well, why do you think a janitor is any less than an astronaut? Why is the janitor any less than a musician? You will say as a response, well, we want someone whose genes suggest that there is a higher IQ, high intelligence. This is what we want to reproduce for our own children. It is norm that you say, I want to marry into a good family with certain traits, certain dispositions. In fact, we will even say, didn't Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam want a better gene, a better hereditary cycle from the past? What did he want to defend Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam on the 10th of Muharram? He specifically chose from Banu Kilab. Whom were whom? Brave warriors, courageous warriors. And this is why he was able to produce Hazrat Abu Fadl Abbas ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. So this is one element. But now, if I was to turn the question and I was to say, if I could get rid of bad genes, lesser genes, would you do it? We said, for example, if you could state, let me get rid of a particular disease. If I could remove from my child blindness, deafness, muteness, if I could remove from them epilepsy, if I could remove Down syndrome, would I sterilize? Would I remove that gene in order to ensure that my child is born without a particular defect? And most people said yes. If they could, they would. It might cost you 10,000, it might cost you 20,000, but if you could, you would. I then posed a moral question, and I asked, well, what's the difference between a person who wishes to remove that particular trait and someone from Nazi Germany who also wished to remove that particular trait? Do you see the problem? Can you see the question? Nazi Germany said, if I could remove all children who had epilepsy, I would do so. If I could remove all children of homelessness, I would do so. If I could remove all criminality from the genes, we would do so. If I asked you, could you do the same? You might say yes. So what is the essential difference between you and someone from Nazi Germany in 1933? This is one question. Then we asked the follow-up and said, in your mind, not you specifically, in this mindset, criminality is lesser as a human being. Epilepsy is lesser as a human being. Blindness is lesser than a human being. But for someone in Nazi Germany, a Jew or a black man or a Muslim was lesser than the white supremacist. So again, is there any difference? If you're willing to get rid of one type of defect, well, the only difference is they saw a different type of defect. They didn't just see defect in terms of being able to see, or being able to hear, or being homeless, or being epileptic, or having Down syndrome. They saw it as your color skin. So what is the difference? If they can get rid of all black and all brown and all yellow and all red, what is the difference? Am I not going down the same rabbit hole? So these were ethical questions that you and I need to answer in this conversation around the issue of white supremacy. Why? Because, as we'll come to in our conclusion, if there is supremacy in us, there is no way we can get rid of supremacy in someone else. I can't go to a white supremacist. I can't stand before David Duke. I can't stand in front of Adolf Hitler. I can't stand in front of Donald Trump and say, why do you think what you think, if actually in me I think the same, but just to a different person, to a different degree. There is no difference between me and him. So how do we answer this question? Islamic and Shi'i literature written in these areas, sad. I'll mention to you a couple of books if you wish to be able to read for yourself. For example, in the non-Shi'i literature, Hizb al-Tahrir have written a good research from the Sunni traditions on the issues of abortion, issues of sterilization. From the Shi'i literature, Dr. Abdul Aziz Sachedina has written a lot of works on biomedical ethics. Lots of literature that, or there's a little bit of literature if you wish to be able to read into it. Now, what do our ulama and what do our marajit say? Shaheed Mutahhari, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, poses this issue in a very beautiful way. He says the following: the issue on the defect and the difference between the Muslim approach and another approach would be simply in the perception of that defect. Whether we perceive it to be lesser inherently, or whether we perceive it to be the absence of owning the particular trait or owning a different particular trait. Let me explain. If we said, for example, a person is blind, the Nazi approach or the supremacist approach would say that because you are blind, because you are deaf, because you have Down syndrome, because you are homeless, because you have this genetic makeup, you are a lesser human being than another human being. Therefore, we have to sterilize you. Because we have to remove all lesser, and therefore we can actually finally have a functioning human race. As long as we have lesser, society is always brought down. Therefore, remove lesser, and we can have an equal society. The Islamic approach is no. Shaheed Mutahhari says, this is only considered to be the absence. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykhuna. Afu fadl. Ijaza? Ahsant. Shaheed Mutahhari, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, states, this is not lesser. This is considered to be the absence of something or the possession of an inability to do something. Meaning, I can see a blind person, it's not lesser. He just has an absence of sight. Or he has the possession of the inability to see. This is not lesser in any way, shape, or form. Rather, it is the alternate to being able to see. Seeing, I can see. If I can't see, it is the alternate state to being able to see. If I am deaf, it is the alternate state to being able to hear. If I am homeless, it is the alternate state to being a possession of a home. Does that make me inherently less as a human being? No, it doesn't. Just because I don't have all the same traits that you have, it doesn't make me less as a human being. The Quran stated this in the verse that we have been using in the opening ayah of our discussions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 17 of the Quran, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the children of Adam. All of mankind is honored. No one is less. No one is less. Now this is interesting because immediately it challenges the way in which we even see a non-Muslim, the way in which we see other sects of Islam as well. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored all of mankind, all of the children of Adam. You are not lesser if you do not possess a particular trait. It just means it is the absence of that particular trait, according to His Eminence, Ayatollah Shaheed Mutahhari. Now, because of that absence, all it means is that you would have a different form of engagement with humanity. It doesn't mean that you are lesser in any particular way. He then states, or the ulama state, that the occurrences, not defects, because we now stated it's not a defect. You're not lesser in any way, shape, or form because you are blind, or because you have Down syndrome, or because of any other trait. These occurrences are therefore within the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if it's in the creation of God Himself, how then can it be a defect? Does God create something in defect? Impossible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not create defect. Allah is perfect. Creation is perfect. In fact, He says this in the Quran, in Surah Al-Mulk. He says, look at my creation. Can you find any defect in my creation? فَرْجِعِ الْبَصَرِ هَلْ تَرَى مِنْ فُتُورٍ. Do you see any defect, any incongruity in my creation? Look again, look again. In the Quran, God says, you will become tired at how much you look at creation and try to find a defect in my creation. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Because these occurrences happen within creation, it is not haphazard. It is not an aberration of creation. It is part of creation itself. Therefore, it is beautiful because Allah is beautiful. Someone who has any different genetic makeup to you and I, or to me, it is no less than me. It is beauty the way I am beauty in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, because of that, the way in which we understand this is just the relationship between certain groups and how fluid one group may be from one to another. There was an interesting social study that was done by certain scientists on this question of occurrences, or what others term defects within genetic makeup. One social scientist traced the deaf community and looked at certain deaf people and gave them a choice as to whether they could undergo operations or whether they could undergo treatment to be able to hear. So they were given a choice. Now this is important. We're going to come back to this word choice in a few minutes. They were given a choice as to whether they would remain deaf or whether they could undergo procedure to start hearing. And of course, the vast majority took the opportunity to be able to hear. Having then now been able to hear, the social scientists studied their relationship to the deaf community that they were previously a part of. So now, having been able to hear, these individuals went back to their own deaf communities. Previously, the form of communication amongst them would be what? Sign language. But now, having been able to hear, the social scientist asked the simple question: now that you can hear, do you still feel part of the deaf community? And does the deaf community still feel that you are a part of them? Can you see this? Because now you have reacquired, or you have acquired a new ability. Are you still part of them or not? All those individuals who could communicate through sign language still communicated, but they could now acquire another form of communication, which was through speech, and they could hear and talk to each other. So they were now part of this group, but they were also part of this group as well, as an individual. But did the deaf group consider them to be still part of them? No, they didn't. They felt estranged from the individuals that had gained the ability of hearing. They said, we don't feel that you are truly a part of us, inherently a part of us. What did this show you? It showed you how fluid the concept of groups were. What did we state these last few nights? All the times these groupings have been created, and then you have to stay within one group. There is no movement up or down. There is no movement in the sideways mechanisms. And if we remain within this, you are white, you can only be white. You are black, you can only be black. You are deaf, you can only be deaf. But we see here that through these technological advancements to remain deaf, you don't have to remain blind. You are actually part of a wider circle. You can be part of one communication group when you are with one group, and you can be part of another communication group when you are with another group. These are just questions of social sciences, and the way in which people perceive themselves within one group, and how one group can so quickly accept you and then all of a sudden reject you just by the virtue of something different within your earpiece. How do human beings see each other? Is that really how we see each other? Am I going to accept you because of something like this and then reject you because of something else? But this is how we have come to see each other. And this questions again the way in which we will begin to see each other. Now, based upon this question, we asked, would you stop your ability to reproduce if you were to reproduce a child of a different occurrence? Different occurrence meaning defect. We asked you that question, and how do you perceive that from happening? What does Islam say about this question? Because you will say, after I give birth to a child, if they have a particular different occurrence, different way of living, then of course through medicine we will try to help them and remove their deafness or remove their blindness or remove their muteness and so on and so forth. But if I could get rid of that in advance, or I could sterilize an entire population so that no longer reproduces, in one generation we would curtail that particular genetic defect altogether, and that would no longer be there after one generation. If we said, for example, all people who are let's say to be born blind, and we weren't to reproduce, in theory, then we would get rid of hereditary blindness altogether. Is that what we should be doing? Is that something that Islam endorses or doesn't endorse? Should we be doing that or should we not be doing that? Does that make us Nazi-like or not Nazi-like? Are we supposed to get rid of blindness before birth so that it doesn't occur in future generations altogether? Well, this goes back to that question. Is there something inherently wrong with being blind? Is there something inherently wrong with being deaf? No, there isn't. Now here, what our Islamic scholars say to us is the following. Number one, Sayyid al-Khou'i, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, in his fatwa, stated, it is permissible for sterilization to take place so long as it is not permanent sterilization. If you permanently sterilize, it is haram. We'll come back to this in a minute as to why. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us no indication whatsoever that we should be trying to sterilize any group of people. What He has stated, however, is that there are certain types of defects that if they are to be created and reproduced, there is kiraha around it. For example, you will know that it is makruh for you to marry your cousin. Why? Because we are told that there is a particular genetic makeup that will come about and you are more likely to bring about disease from that. Correct? We know that it is makruh to marry cousins. Based upon this, it is kiraha for you to bring about a new disease. But the question of something like someone being blind or someone being deaf, there is no precedent in the eyes of Islam to tell us that we should be stopping that person from being born. Someone who has a congenital disease or a herited disease, there is no reason for us to stop that person being born in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if now there is the question of stopping that, are we Nazi-like or are we not Nazi-like? The answer is very simple. It is based on two issues. Number one, it is based on your niyyah, and two, it is based on the form in which you stop that from happening. The intention in the eyes of Nazi Germany was that these people are lesser than us. If you have that idea, then it is haram upon you. The second is that when they sterilized and when they did this, they did it through mass murder. And so, of course, this would not be permitted. But the question comes about now. If I am a person who has a particular congenital defect or a herited occurrence, and I don't want to reproduce a child, what do I do this particular? Here, there is a number of fatwa that talk about this particular issue. Number one, His Eminence, Sayyid Khamenei, may Allah grant him the longest of lives, said Khamenei has a very interesting fatwa that actually goes against the majority of what the Marajit say. His opinion is very beautiful, very interesting. Let us say, for example, he is posed the question in his fatwa that a husband and wife cannot reproduce. One of them is unable to reproduce. Is it permissible for one of them to get an outside sperm donor or an egg donor in order to bring life into this world? The majority of the marajit say, if you are getting sperm donor, this would not be permissible. Why? Because the person who gives the sperm and the mother are not mahram with each other. Correct? So now you cannot have the sperm donor to go into the womb of the mother, which means she will remain without child for the rest of her life. Sayyid Khamenei says, no, this is wrong. Why? Because first and foremost, there is a right for her to be able to bring life into this world. Part of being a woman is motherhood. It is her right to be able to bring a child. Even if that donor is gharib, strange, not mahram, an alien donor that we don't know. Can you see the way Sayyid Khamenei, may Allah bless him, is thinking about this issue? Not just within the fiqhi sense of mahramiyya, but within the human sense of the equation itself. So now the question is posed based upon this interesting fatwa and the evolution of fatawa. If I have a particular congenital defect or I have a herited defect and I don't want to bring someone into this world and I want to curtail from this disease, am I permitted to that or not? Or is the right to bring in life greater or not? The ethicists say, you as an individual can decide not to bring a life if you feel that there is going to be great harm to yourself, or if you don't want to bring a child into that world of that particular defect or occurrence. So long, not something being persuaded to you from an outside entity. You yourself wish to make a decision, you can make a decision. That doesn't make you supremacist. It means that you yourself don't want to reproduce that type of life into the world. But so long as it is an autonomous decision, it is permitted for you to make that decision. If it is society that is telling you someone who is blind is lesser, someone who is deaf is lesser, someone who has a particular disease is lesser, then that decision is not permitted upon you, because the way in which you are reaching the decision is from an evil source. Can you see how detailed Islam goes into this issue? Because others have answers to this. When the white supremacist asks you tomorrow and says, what happens if you bring a lesser child into this world? Do you want to bring a lesser child into this world? Do you want to bring someone who's blind into this world? Someone who is disabled into this world? And you say no, his response to you will be, well, then what's the difference between me and you? This is how we answer it. The intention and the action that brings this answer about is the main decision. If you think someone is lesser than you, then there's no difference between you and the Nazi. Islam doesn't permit you to see anyone as lesser than them. It only permits you to be able to see them as equal. In that equality, if you wish to try to curtail a particular disease from being produced, it is your permission to be able to do that. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So that was some detail. Otherwise, we would be in conflict with, or we would be not knowing how to answer the issue that a Nazi or a white supremacist might bring up to us. We do not see anyone lesser than us, even if they have any debilitating disease. And that has to govern our thinking in this issue. Now, we move to the last issue, and then we give certain Islamic solutions to these challenges. The last issue is white supremacists want to create what is known as an ethno-state. A state, a country built on one ethnicity, meaning they only want white people, whatever that word means, because that word is clearly problematic. Whatever that whiteness is, they only want that type of person to be in. What are their arguments? What are the points that they bring up? Now, the argument that is brought up, I just want to bring it very briefly because we don't have too much time, but I will read to you some quotes of certain white supremacists and what they state about white ethno-states and why they want a white ethno-state. And actually, some of the arguments are very interesting. And particularly here in the United States, when you see the birth rates between white and non-white, you will actually see that white is on the decline and non-white is on the rise. And that's one of the main issues that comes about. Now, our friend Christopher Cantwell, who was one of the leaders of the Charles students that you all would have remembered from last year, he said the following, and I quote, "White people are not inclined to the types of behaviors that non-whites are." If you remember yesterday, we stated the whole idea behind some of the language that is being used is that non-whites are barbarians, non-whites are uncivilized, non-whites or blacks are more aggressive by nature, and so on and so forth. Therefore, his argument, based upon this idea, is that whites are civilized. We do not incline to certain type of behavior. Therefore, if we want our type of behavior to exist, we need to get rid of all non-whites so that our way of living, which is superior to others, continues on. David Duke, our friend David Duke, he says the following: there is an ethnic cleansing of America. And so, because the white is being ethnically cleansed, we need to stop that from happening. We need to stop immigration of non-whites, and then we can actually have an all-white ethnic society. Now, you'll remember that we talked about anti-miscegenation laws, that races were not permitted to intermarry, right? Filipino was not allowed to marry native, black was not allowed to marry white. So David Duke's argument is, the more immigrants that we allow into this country, the more you will find that they are intermarrying. And this is how there is an ethnic cleansing. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is my opinion. It's not sourced anywhere else, but I will tell you, in my humble reflections, that the entire rise of Donald Trump by certain individuals who are behind him, who are financing him, who are pushing the agenda on his behalf to help him come, was entirely about this issue of demographics. Not white demographics. Because of this issue, you will actually notice, if you do your own research statistically, GOP voters were on the decline. Reasons for this are things like an aging population or a dying out population, and also younger voters and immigrant voters. Younger voters and immigrant voters tend to sway towards Democratic vote, somewhere between 60-40 and 70-30, depending on statistics that you read, which means within one generation, there would not be any possibility of a Republican government, statistically, because younger voters incline towards Democratic Party, immigrants incline towards Democratic Party. It should be, historically, that religions, we would vote Republican, party of family values, this and that. But even now, ethnic minorities and even now, religious folk are disinclining towards the Republican Party due to certain reasons. How do you bring the balance? How do you ensure that there is the next generation of Republican voters? Go about on a scaremongering process. Go about in a way which brings rise to white supremacy, to racism, and that will ensure that people who are voting on this way will continue to vote this way. So the whole issue is not really about race. It's always been about votes, to ensure that one party can remain in power, or at least the ability to remain in power. Now, having seen what our friends Cantwell and Duke say, I'll just give you one more quote. I'm sure you've heard of Jorge Ramos, the famous television interviewer. Jorge had an interview with someone called Jared Taylor. It's very well known, available to you on YouTube. He says the following. Jared Taylor is a white supremacist, but he is a very articulate, intelligent white supremacist, and he tries to be the spokesperson of white supremacy in the United States of America. Our whiteness is going to disappear. We need to preserve our endangered species, the white man, because it's on the decline. He says the following: if whites permit themselves to be displaced, it is not just the high culture that the West could disappear, but such things as representative government, rule of law, freedom of speech, those things which whites usually gets right and everybody else gets wrong. So not only are white people better in their behavior, they are more highly cultured, and things like representative government, rule of law, and freedom of speech would also disappear. White people disappear. Because you know, brown and black people, we don't have freedom. But in order to protect freedom of speech, you have to protect white people. So this is the argument for an ethno-state. And the more interbreeding and intermarriage that takes, the less white people there will be in the world, and eventually all of them will go. So now there was a study that was done, this is amazing, from the University of New Hampshire, and recently it said more white Americans are now dying than being in 1/3 of states. More white people are dying than being born in 1/3 of US states. And it shows are outpacing those births, and in particular, it also found that there is an increase in Latino, Black, and Asian populations in the United States of America. So from David Duke is right, population will eventually decrease, and there'll be the minority in the United States of America. So you have to protect white people by removing immigrants and stopping intermarriage from taking. So having seen this, we now have to respond, and this is the argument from white supremacy. How then do we go and respond? Now, first, that Islam, in the way in which it sees society in two ways. First thing, that the completion of a human being and the completion of humanity as a collective can only be done through the meetings and coexistences of various different types of peoples and populations. The ethnic exclusivity, Islam sees the exact opposite, and inclusivity is the only way for your perfection and your completion. Imagine if all of you were only one type of people. Let's just say, for the sake of saying it, you were all Pakistani, or you were all Irani, or you were all Khoja, God forbid. Right? As a Khoja, I can say that. I'm not racist. If you were all one type of people, but look at the beauty of your being makeup. There are some here who are Pakistani, there are some here who are Irani, there are some here who are Khoja, and by know each other, express the fullness of your religion together. Accommodate for one of each other. Make sure that we understand each other's languages, each other's culture. It's the most divisive thing, right? Not the matam, it's the food that comes and is served. But what experiences, you get to become better human beings because you learn not to tolerate each other, but to love one another. The term toleration is used with each other. Well, you shouldn't. Yeah, it's not about tolerating. Do the wives tolerate them? Put up with you. It's not about I put up with you. I learn to love you. I learn to understand your traits, your features, your imperfections are your perfections. Valentine's Day is gone. Take language. In the same way, We have to learn to live with each other, learn to love with each other, rather than being exclusive. As the says, شعوب لتعارفوا. We have created you of different nations and tribes for the purpose of getting to know. Ethno-state wishes not to know you. It wishes to make you exclusive. Islam says no, it wants you to get to know people. Don't make yourself exclusive. Now, make sure Sufi brethren are comfortable in coming here. Make sure your Wahhabi brethren are comfortable in coming here. Make sure your Christian brethren are comfortable in coming here. Make sure your atheist brethren are comfortable in coming here. We have made you different nations and tribes, lita'arafu, so that you may get to know one another. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now the problem, the second issue that the Quran mentions, and I'm going to have to speed through this because our time is little. The second issue the Quran mentions about this, society is too easily manipulated. As we've been mentioning you, in the 16 to 1900s, the concept of race was built. It wasn't there in this way previous. It was built to destroy a particular group of people, to keep them down, to depress them, and to elevate one over the other. And as I've been saying, many of us adopt these terms and embed the existence of this system. The Quran mentions that the way in which God sees our structure of society is very different to the way in which we have structured our societies. You know how easily manipulated we are? I'll give you an example. I only found this out a couple of days ago as I was watching something on the internet. In 1993, so we're talking very recently, in 1993 in China, they started something on November 11/11, known as Singles Day, because 11, 1 and 1, looks like two people, yeah? So the idea 11/11, two single people. So they instituted something for the first time ever called Singles Day, where you would celebrate your singleness. Anyway, it turned out that this became a day in which people decided to get married on as a response to Singles Day. Nevertheless, in 2017, last year, Alibaba, have you heard of the website Alibaba? Alibaba is one of the biggest companies in the world. For the last few years, Alibaba decided to monetize, commercialize Singles Day. Just like Christmas is commercialized, Easter is commercialized, Eid is commercialized. I will even go as far as saying some of our religious festivals are also commercialized. Has been, how much do these hotels charge? Yeah. Alibaba started a few years ago the commercialization of Singles Day. Started in 1993. Only 5 years ago, they started the commercialization process of it. 2017, a few months back. Do you know how much was spent in celebration of Singles Day just on Alibaba? 25 billion US dollars. One day to celebrate Singles Day. You know what they did? Alibaba created a 24-hour show, flew in Hollywood celebrities, everything. They were paid huge money for the purpose of you going on to Alibaba and buying something. 25 billion US dollars was spent in celebration of a day that was created in 1993. Please, listen to what I'm saying. You and I are so easily manipulated. They tell us to do something, we jump through hoops for these people. Why? Why do you jump through hoops for these people? Why do you allow yourselves to be manipulated by these people? Are you nothing more than a rag doll? Are you a puppet? Let us have self-respect. It's the same issue with the way in which society has been structured. Now, the Quran talks about the way in which society should be structured, and we should see each other. Whether we should see each other as exclusive people or a united set of people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
Thank you so much. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter number 21. I can't read through all the verses, but the verses of Surah Al-Anbiya, it goes through all the major prophets one by one. It names them all. So for example, verse 69, Ibrahim alayhi salam. Verse 72, Ishaq and Yaqub. Verse number 76, Nuh. 78, Sulaiman. Verse number 83, Ayyub alayhi salam. 85, Ismail, Idris, Dhul Khifl. 89, mention all of these prophets except our prophet. All of the prophets except our prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says the following: Inna hadihi ummatakum ummatan. You are one community. All those who believe in any of those prophets, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't mention our prophet. If you believe in any of those prophets, you are one community. Inna hadihi ummatakum ummatan wahida. You are one community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says in this, and he now says about certain people in the next verse, you are all one community, but وَتَقَطَّعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ. People broke that into pieces. Then he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَلَا كُفْرَانَ لِسَعْيِهِ وَإِنَّا لَهُ كَاتِبُونَ. Whoever shall do good deeds and is a believer in one of these prophets, there shall be no denying his exertion, and we shall write it down for him to reward him with it. Look at the difference between how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees humanity and the way in which we have seen humanity. Now, this is an important response to a white supremacist, what I'm going to give to you now. Please note this name down, write it down, circulate it amongst yourselves. Please, this is the study which will respond to you for the last 2 nights. Between 16 to 1900, race was created. Let's answer race. I'm going to ask a simple question. Is race inherent or is race socially created? That's the question. Because if race is inherent, then maybe there is one race that is better than the other. White is better than black, black is better than red, yellow is better than brown, so on and so forth. If it is socially created, then there's no such thing as race. Then you are not racial, you are a human being. This is the question. This is the question to respond. Please Google Professor Philip Kitcher and a study from City called Interbreeding Populations. They didn't say race, they said interbreeding populations. Kitcher, K-I-T-C-H-E-R, Professor Philip Kitcher and his works, and particularly the Stanford work called Interbreeding Populations. What does he say? And what does this study tell us? Some argue that race, that you can divide up human anatomy, brain size, physiology, genetics, and there is a differentiation between us, and therefore race exists. He looked, or this study looks at the bio and the psychological sciences, and it states that even within these groups that are divided up, there are variations in them. So even though we say someone is black, someone is European, even within them there are genetic differences amongst them. Number one. He then sees that this study looks at the gene frequencies amongst the whole of mankind and asks this question. Listen, if we were to divide humanity's gene sequences into only 2 groups, what would those 2 groups look like? Yes? If I was to take all of humanity's gene sequences and divide them into 2 groups, because we're trying to create race, one race here, one race there, how would they be divided? And he said the following, or this Stanford study came out with the following, and said, if you were to divide the whole of humanity into 2 genetic sequences, one group would be made up of those from Africa, West Asia, and Europe. And if you were to divide them into 2 groups, Africa and Europe are made up of the same essential gene sequence. So there's no difference between Africa, Asia, and Europe. It's the rest. Then this study did a further one and divided the same groups into 3. If you were to divide all of humanity into 3 gene sequences, what would you find? Africa, European, and the rest of the world. And then the study goes on and divides them into 4. And he states that if you were to take the first 5 racial groups, the 6th would be population of people that just remain in mountainous regions that have not had communication with the rest of the main world. What does that tell you? It tells you that race is divided the way in which you want to divide it up. There is no inheriting such as black and white, such as European and African. It is because we decide to divide them in that particular way. Because if you only wanted to divide gene sequences into 2, Africa, West Asia, and Europe would be in one group. The rest of the world would be in the other group. So there is no such thing as race. By you, it can be stopped by you. Therefore, if you wish to divide human gene or 2, you can also divide it into 1. What is that called? The human race. You are the human race, brothers and sisters. That is what you are. That is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. That is how God sees you. That is how we need to be seeing each other. Now, based upon this, he does say that yes, there are certain distinctions amongst people. And the reasons for that is because certain groups historically have not married with others. Groups have remained with others. So they do make up certain gene sequences within themselves. He says that is good because if you need to know whom you are more closely related to, you need to know your gene sequence. If you need a kidney from someone, you need to know which gene sequence, you need to know which groups you closely belong to. But in terms of dividing up humanity for the sake of ethics, then they're us up, other than for the sake of the benefit of humanity. Now, I've taken my full hour, but 5 more minutes, only because I want to tell you what are the Islamic solutions to the issue of white supremacy. If you allow me, please give me a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Number 1, very quickly, how do we get rid of white supremacy? Islam states, to get rid of white supremacy or any type of supremacy externally, you have to get rid of supremacy internally amongst yourselves in the community. There is huge racism inside the Muslim community, so long as that is within you as an individual. So long as you make any sort of throwaway joke, racist joke, so long as there is racism within the community, so long as you see a particular better than you or less than you, there is no point in going to a white supremacist and telling them not to be supremacist because there is no difference between you and them. Number 1. Number 2, we have to confront the issue of white supremacy and understand that it exists. This is a tough question for many people because the concept systemic racism, for some people, they don't want to confront this issue. The same way in society, we have to accept that there has been patriarchy, we also have to accept racial supremacies. Now, this is a chameleon. The way in which racial supremacy and white supremacy in particular has manifested itself in different institutions are entirely different from one to another. The way in which white supremacy has manifested itself in medicine may have been different to the way in which it was in education. Will be different to the way it was in the court system. It was different from how Filipino white supremacy was compared to Hawaiian, compared to European. So we have to understand each and every one of these things and tackle them at their particular root in terms of confronting them. Now, there are certain good books I'm going to recommend to you if you'd like to read them, pass them on to your colleagues as real good books that deal with solutions, because we don't have time to go into everything. I'll recommend to you Joy de Greyer, and she writes an amazing book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, PTSS. De Greyer has a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and this talks about very well how to deal with some of these post-slavery systems that we have across the world. Also read into Bell Hooks as well as a great author for dealing and confronting all types of white supremacy in the world. The third solution Islam requires us is that we don't have an inferiority complex. The same way some people have a superiority complex, some people have an inferiority complex. I would suggest that even those people coming out of colonization in the Indian subcontinent, many of them have held on to an inferiority complex. They will say, this guy, and again, I don't believe in white and black, but the person will say, white, he has, therefore I need to get a PhD degree in order to be at an equal level of being able to get a job. Or he is better than me, he is more likely to get a better job than me. We have to remove from our own selves any type of inferiority complex before we can make an equilibrium within society. A phenomenal book, brilliant book that talks about dealing with inferiority complexes within racial minorities is called, it's by Shirin Razak, and it's called Looking White People in the Eye. Looking white people in the eye. And it talks about in education and in the court system, in the justice system, how there needs to be equality between all colors of peoples. Very good book. I really recommend that everyone looks into some of these works. Last, fourthly, fourth way Islam talks about removing supremacy, racial construct. Very simple. Decolorize your own eyes. Meaning, learn to remove from your own vocabulary the concept of someone being black, someone being brown, someone being white. The same way the racial contexts have been created, and if you perpetuate them, if you continue to perpetuate them, then they continue to exist. I remember one alim, he said to me, you know, I tell my family, I don't have any white friends. He is someone who is black. He said, I tell my daughters, I don't have any white friends. So they said, but what about such and such? He comes over to the house all the time. Isn't he white? I said, no, you're not understanding my point. I don't see white. I don't see black. I don't see brown. I don't see red. I don't see yellow. I see human being. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees human being. So he doesn't say this person is brown or this person is black. And if you want to be able to remove racial hatred, you have to remove the concept at its very foundation itself. You know what the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says? Khairun nas anfa'an nas. The best of mankind are those people who do most good to mankind. He sees mankind. In his sermon of Ghadir, you know, may Allah bless us as Shi'as, but in Ghadir we only know one line. Man kuntum mawla fahadan aliyun mawla. If I asked you, no, I'm sure all of you know the rest of the sermon, but if I asked the majority of Shia, what else was said? You know, it's really funny. We'll tell our Sunni brethren, the Prophet gathered everyone in the heat and he spoke for a whole hour. And then he said, Man kuntum mawla fahadhan aliyun mawla. Do you really think he brought everyone together and spoke to them for an hour only to tell Ali ibn Abi Talib is your friend? Come on. Great. But what else did he say for the other 59 minutes? We don't know. We don't read it. We don't think about it. But you know what he said in that sermon? The Holy Prophet of Islam said, there is no difference between white and black, and no difference between Arab and Ajam. I'm going to make a challenge. Tell me something. In the Quran, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ever refer to people as black and white? So I'm asking you a question. If Allah doesn't, if the Prophet doesn't, why do you? Why do you say this person is black? He's not. He's a human being. Why would you want to be racialized and say you are this color? You're a human being. Allah has made us different shades of color. That is it. But so long as the term is negative. Now, someone will respond and say, but a certain group of people have had an experience. Haven't black people had a certain experience? And if you get rid of color altogether, then how do you deal with the realities of their experience? Today, the month of February is Black History Month. If you just get rid of color altogether, then how do you appreciate their experience of slavery and everything to now? For now, if we say that there has been violence from certain groups of police officers against black males, if we don't acknowledge color, then we cannot state the problem, can we? So as much as you want to get rid of color, Jaffer, you have to understand color exists. How do we deal with this objection? The objection is very simple. Where color is used positively, use it. Wherever color is used to reinforce anything negative, don't use it. So in our current state, where we need to talk about systemic violence against black males by police officers, whether it exists or not is another question, but we're talking about it. Where we have to talk about it, retain the discussion of black and white. But where we no longer need to use it and say he is black, he is yellow, learn to remove it altogether. He is a human being, he is a human being. They are both equal. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. And over a period of time, you will equalize and inshallah remove the concept of racial hatred altogether. Islam doesn't act the way other religions and ideologies act. Marxism wants to create a class war between feminism, wants to create a class war between male and female, between gender. Racialism wants to create a class war between black and white. Today, everything is seen through black and white. The film, seen through black and black actors. Everyone's racializing. Islam doesn't create these wars. Concluding statement, please. Then we go into the gham. Islam does not create wars between rich and poor, between man and woman, between black and white. Islam's war is on ilm and ma'rifah versus jahiliyyah. That is it. Not jahiliyyah in the sense of, you know, kafir. No. Jahiliyyah, even a Muslim, even I can be jahil, ignorant. Islam's war is purely on jahiliyyah. Those are the divides that Islam sees. This is why Allah says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Most surely the most honorable of you in the eyes of Allah. Nothing to do with man and woman, nothing to do with color, nothing to do with location, nothing to do with country. Taqwa. And that's it. And these are the ways in which you and I will be able to overcome and defeat supremacy, inshallah. If we defeat it in ourselves, we'll be able to defeat it in the rest of the world. Start with ourselves and we will make on the knock-on effect, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We thank you, I thank you for bearing patiently with these three discussions on supremacy and the ways in which you and I can tackle it. As we've been stating, this discussion is entirely prefaced on the martyrdom anniversary of Her Eminence Lady Fatima alayhi salam. Look at the way Fatima salamullahi alayha saw other people. Famous hadith. She's praying her Salat al-Layl. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam is but a boy. In the darkness of the night, where everybody else is asleep, this young boy is watching his mother pray Salat al-Layl, imbibing that good character, learning from his mother. Fatima lifts her hands and she begins to make dua. As you know, it is recommended that you seek forgiveness for 40 people, dead or alive. It is not only 40. Our ulama tell us you can do any number you want. You can do 1,000 if you wish to. But at least do 40. Having recited whatever number of people she had sought forgiveness for and finished her salah, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam asks his dear mother and says, "Oh mother, I heard you asking forgiveness for everyone else. You would ask for this person and that person and this person and that person. And only at the very end of that list did you mention us in the house. Why didn't you mention Rasulullah first? Why didn't you mention your husband, our father Ali ibn Abi Talib first? Why didn't you pray for us first?" Listen to the way Fatima sees relationships between people. She says, Salamullahi alayha, she says, Ad-jar thumma ad-dar. Neighbors, then the household. Look at the way in which she saw. Doesn't this get rid of all hatred for another person? And if you are able to kill this woman off, then you're able to once again bring about every type of supremacy again. Fatima is lying on her deathbed. She has been going to the grave of her father and crying and weeping, "Oh Father, did you see what they did to me? Did you see how they took my rights? Did you see how they snatched a piece of paper in my hand which was giving me back fadak and ripped it and threw it in my face?" She would cry so much that people came to Ali ibn Abi Talib and said to Ali ibn Abi Talib about her, "Oh Ali, the crying of Fatima is so much, tell her to either cry in the day or in the night." So now Fatima comes and she only cries at one time. They come back and say to, "Oh Ali, we are trying to sleep, we are trying to rest at the night, we are trying to work in the day. Please tell her to cry further away so we don't have to hear the cries of Fatima." What does he do? He has to go and build for her a house in which she is able to cry. Listen to the oppression upon Fatima. Not only do they brutalize her, not only do they attack her, allow her to grieve over what she had happened to her. Eventually, the injuries that Fatima has sustained are so much. Eventually, the injuries are so much that this has overcome her ability to even leave the house altogether. She comes towards Fizza and she says, "Oh Fizza, I am going to retire to my room and I will be reciting Quran. And if you are to not hear any more recitation from me, then know that Fatima has returned back to her Lord." We are told that one day Ali ibn Abi Talib comes home and he sees Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam sitting in the corner of the room. Hassan is crying. Hassan is weeping, inconsolable. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, The father of the orphan sits down beside Hassan. He wipes away the tears. He says, oh my beloved Hassan, why are you crying so much? Why do I see you in this state? He looks up into the eyes of his father. He says, oh father, if you had seen what I had seen when they attacked the door, you would be weeping the way in which I am weeping as well. I am crying because I saw what happened to my mother Fatima. Fatima's injuries were such that her ribs had been broken, such that she was unable to move properly. But even despite all of that, Fatima would continue to work within the house, continue to look after her children, continue to look after her husband. But eventually the pain has become so much. She tells Fizza, I am going into the room. She begins to recite the Quran. We remember even in the final moments that Fatima gives a will to Ali ibn Abi Talib. She says, oh my dear Ali, when you are feeling aggrieved from what is happening to me after my death, you should recite Surah Al-Hadid from the Quran, because in Surah Al-Hadid there are ayat which will give you satisfaction and happiness, will give you consolation from what has happened. Oh Ali, I commend to you that you should marry again, because I need people to look after the children, and besides, man cannot do without woman. In this state, Fatima resides in this room. It is said that Fizza is sitting outside that door. She is listening to Fatima reciting the Quran, but after a little bit of time, the voice becomes soft. And even after more time, the voice becomes no more. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Fatima has departed from this world. Fizza is listening to this. She knocks on the door. She says, oh my dear lady Fatima, I cannot hear your voice. I cannot hear your recitation. There is no response. A second time, a third time, she enters into the room and sees Fatima has departed from this world. They go and call Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is inside Masjid Nabawi. He returns back to see his beautiful flower having departed. He says, oh Fatima, you are a flower that came from paradise. Your fragrance remains with me, and you have returned back towards paradise. It is said that he now begins to give ghusl and kafan to Fatima. Salama says that as Ali was inside that room giving ghusl to Fatima, we heard a cry from Ali ibn Abi Talib, the likes of which we had not heard before. Such a mournful cry. After a few minutes, when Ali ibn Abi Talib came out, we asked him, what happened? Why did you cry so much? He says, when I was giving ghusl to my dear wife Fatima, I put my hand upon her chest and I felt the broken ribs. We did not know the extent of the injuries upon Fatima, and when I felt that rib, I could not help but sit down and just cry over what happened to my wife Fatima. Fatima had stated in her will, do not allow those enemies of mine who have oppressed me to know when and where I am being buried. Bury me at night and in secret. And in this state, Ali ibn Abi Talib takes out the body of Fatima to be buried in the darkness of the night. And even until today, we do not know where Fatima is buried.
ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please raise your hands, join each other in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we are to pass away from this world before his coming, raise us from our grave so that we partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask for Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times, those people in a state of war, oppression, homelessness, disease and disaster. Ya Allah, bihaqqi Fatima al-Zahra, grant them all safety, security, victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. We ask for Ya Allah, help us to understand the challenges of our time, particularly when it comes to racism and supremacy. Help us to be able to be a means of overcoming supremacy wherever it may be, so that there may be justice in the world, just as we wish to be able to see in this world. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Matima Hussein, Ya Hussein. Matima Fatima, Ya Fatima.
حسین یا حسین
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein,
ہر دربار میں روتی رہی کھڑی زہرا، بھری در